Dr. Karen Molano. I am a clinical psychologist and infant, family, and early childhood specialist.
What inspired you to get into the mental health field?
Oh, well, I remember when I was maybe 5 years old, I just knew I wanted to be a doctor of some sort. I just wanted to be a doctor, had no idea what that looked like at the age of 5. And as I was getting closer to college, my dad kept pushing me, like, you got to declare your major, you got to declare it. And I had no idea. So I made it up. I said, biology, not true. And so when I started college, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I went in undeclared, but that very first semester, I started taking courses in psychology. I had never had done so before, and I fell in love with human behavior and just understanding the brain and relationships. And from that point on, I stuck with it, and that's pretty much how I got into mental health. Is just from that point on, I went and got my master's, got my doctorate, and I've never stopped. I just keep going and keep learning.
Yeah, what is it like helping younger kids?
Well, it's definitely been a journey because I started when I was in my early 20s. I was going to school to get my degree. I would just work with kids, but then once I got my master's, I decided to apply for a social work position. And so I started working with a foster family agency, and I would be that person that would pick up children after they were removed from their parents, and I would take them to their foster home. So it was really challenging because these kids were in a lot of distress and a lot of pain, but I just loved being able to provide that space for them. And I continued that journey. Then I moved on to working with LA County Department of Mental Health and stuck with that population. So we work for specialized foster care, which is where all the children that go through Child Protective Services would come to us for an assessment so we could get them to where they needed to be. So while is, and was a very, very rewarding journey to be able to provide that assistance, it definitely comes with its battles because I think I've seen things that I would never imagine were even humanly possible. So it's one of those like you really need to take your breaks and take a vacation sometimes to be able to separate from it from a minute and be able to come back and really offer and provide those services.
Yeah, can you tell me a little bit about your own mental health journey?
Absolutely. So I'm actually an immigrant. I moved to the United States from Colombia when I was 7, and I come from a very loving family. But when I moved to the US, a lot of my family was back home. So it was really more my immediate family. And I started school and I didn't speak a word of English. And kids can be really mean. And so there was a lot of bullying going on, a lot of bullying. And from that moment on, it started me on this path of like, wow, I don't feel like I belong. And so it took me a long time to feel like I belonged anywhere. But at the same time, it fueled me to want to learn, to want to do things differently, and to believe. I've always believed that there's always a way around this and that you could take an adversity and shift it, even at a young age. And so just living in another country with different ideas and trying to adapt to a culture that was very different from mine was very challenging. And then over time, um, once I did adapt, I went to school. I did the whole thing in order based on what society would expect. That I went and got my degree. I got married, and then I wanted to be a mom. And it was like something that to me was really important, and I couldn't get pregnant. So I had a lot of infertility issues, and I got hit with really, really bad depression and anxiety at the time. And so between battling infertility, I went through a divorce not that long after that. I did have my baby, so I do have a 10-year-old, so I'm very grateful. Yay. But in that process, I sought Eastern medicine to help me to heal and overcome it. And that's really what opened up the door to where I am today, where it was bridging the gap between Western and Eastern medicine And then later on in life, I ended up with mold toxicity. So mold got into my brain, and then I experienced really severe depression all over again, but more from a toxin standpoint, which I didn't even realize could happen. And so that opened my eyes to a whole new world of really incorporating holistic medicine into my practice, just my personal experiences with mental health.
Yeah, can you explain a little bit of Eastern and Western practices?
Yes. So the way I look at it is the brain is this organ that takes care of us. It's like it tells everything, everywhere what to do, but it requires to have that environment to thrive, the brain, the gut, the body. And so there are a lot of things that we don't necessarily consider when we think about mental health, like the gut. So the gut is responsible for creating all those chemicals that help us to feel good, help us to calm down, that help us to wake up in the morning feeling like we have a purpose. And so when we don't supply our gut with that environment to create those chemicals, then it is going to be 10 times harder to calm down, to feel joy, to feel that excitement and that passion in life. So that's, for example, an area where I incorporate nutrition and gut health into how we can look at it from a place where it's going to help improve our mood, our everyday mood. So how can we support the gut so that it can support our brain and help create those chemicals? Because really our microbiome is responsible for the majority of all those chemicals that are responsible for the way we feel. And it's something we don't really talk about or really think about much. At least I didn't learn it in school. I had to go and seek it out on my own.
What are some of the things you've learned from your 10-year-old?
Oh my goodness. He teaches me everything. So I always think that kiddos, before having one, it's like, oh, we have so much to teach them. But I really believe they come to teach us so much. And they're these beautiful, enlightened beings with so much wisdom and so much knowledge that, wow, I feel like there's a lesson every day. An example might be just recently, I was feeling stressed, anxious in the morning. I just had a lot going on and I'm on this mode. And he stops me and he's like, Mom, what's wrong? What's going on? And I'm like, I just have too much going on. And those are the times when I maybe not as responsive to him. And so when he sees that I calm down, he'll come up to me and say like, hey Mom, all you have to do is tell me that you're feeling stressed out and we could just talk about it. We can figure this out together. You get to be stressed too, but it helps me if you tell me about it. So he'll say things like that. Or if he sees that, I'm having a really hard time, he'll say, Mommy, what makes you happy? And I'll say, you. So he'll say things like, well, then just think about me and that'll make you feel better. So he brings so much wisdom. But I think where it's been the most impactful for me is the fact that I had a hard time becoming pregnant. And the fact that I was able to get pregnant and give birth to a child, because I did have miscarriages. He taught me that there is a way, that anything is possible, that if you're curious enough and that if you wonder enough in the world and look for alternatives and don't just take things for face value, that things are possible. So for me, he's a symbol of that belief that anything is possible. And so he drives me, especially when I'm feeling like, oh, I don't know if I can do this or push through. I remember him and I remember the lessons I've learned in this journey of all the things I've overcome and achieved. He is that symbol for me of possibilities, the endless possibilities.
I know for me, I live with bipolar disorder too, and I didn't realize it, and I didn't get diagnosed until I was 37. I'm 42 now, but it a lot of it focuses on like childhood trauma. How important is it to talk about this trauma while kids are kids?
I think it is at the cornerstone of everything I do. So as you mentioned, what I see in all of us because I don't think there is an exception to this one, is that as adults, we're all experiencing something. We're trying
Yeah.
to overcome a belief, overcome some difficulty in life, reverse something, whether it's emotional health or physical health, because there's a lot of chronic illness in the world as well. And so we're constantly battling with something or doubting ourselves, or we don't have that belief in ourselves, or how do we get through this day? And when you look at that, when you go back to childhood, and this is why I focus on a pregnancy in the first 5 years, our core beliefs and the way we view the world, the way we interact with the world, all happens in those first 5 to 7 years of life. That's when all of those beliefs are instilled. We actually, the brain waves, the way it works when we're little, we're literally in a state of hypnosis. And so when you're in a state of hypnosis, basically everything you hear around you just becomes wired in your brain. This is also why kids believe in Santa and the Tooth Fairy, because they're in a state of hypnosis. Whatever they hear, they take for truth. And so if we were to take this time to intentionally wire the brain and intentionally help build the architecture of the brain and provide that environment for it to thrive, then we wouldn't be having as many difficulties in life as we see ourselves later on. It'd be not that adversity stops happening, because it doesn't. It's the way we approach it. It's the way we perceive it. And so that's for kids now, right? Little ones. But for us as adults, I think it's so incredibly important to go back and revisit what it is that happened and heal from it, because it's going to keep coming up. It's never going to stop coming up until you take a moment to stop and listen. I always think of feelings are messengers. They're not good. They're not bad. They're just data. They're here to bring us a message, but we've been raised in a way where we have to push them aside. Like, we don't want anything to do with them if they don't feel good. And if they're too good, then we're shamed for having them too. It's like, oh no, you're too much if you're too happy. And so what happens is we push them aside and they just come and they're knocking like, hello, I have a message for you. But they don't ever stop coming until you listen. And so then they're just going to start banging a little harder on the door, breaking the windows. Like, I have a message for you. You got to listen to me. And so that's where that trauma comes in. It's like, if we could stop and listen to the message, it would really make a difference as to how we can shift the way we view the world and how the world shows up for us.
What do you do to help your own mental health?
It's an everyday. I think it's no different than going to the gym or instilling a daily routine. If, let's say, you are a water drinker or whatever it is that you do, it is a muscle. The brain is a muscle that we have to constantly train. And so for me, it's about really being in tune with my emotions, because we have so many thoughts going through our head all day long. So many. It would be, to me, my personal opinion, really impossible to catch every thought that isn't in alignment with us. But what we do feel is when our feelings are a little bit off, even if it's just a little bit, we feel it. It starts with usually boredom. Like, I'm starting to feel bored. Then it's a little bit of frustration, and it starts to go a little bit deeper and deeper. So if we were to pay closer attention to our bodies and the way we feel and tune into that, now we know, ooh, there's a thought there that accompanies that feeling that isn't feeling quite well in my body. So to take a moment and just ask yourself the question, like, why am I having this emotion? When we can catch it early enough, it is much easier to shift the energy around it and just pivot a little bit from it than it is when we let it go. By the end of the day, if you've been having it, that's it. Like, you're better off just taking a nap and starting over the next day. But again, it's being very intentional about the way, what you're saying to yourself, the commentary, because we can be very kind beings, but we're really mean to ourselves. Like, if we were to record the things we say to ourselves, would we ever say any of that to another person? Probably
No.
not. There's no way. And so it's that intentionality and remembering, like, okay, let me take a moment. And I literally, when I feel, especially when I'm feeling really overwhelmed or anxious or whatever the emotion is, to just stop and take a moment, because you're better off taking a moment to check in with yourself than to keep pushing through, because then it's just going to get worse. Not only that, but then when you're in that fight or flight and you start to stay in beta waves, is what you would call it, it takes longer to get things done. Things don't work out as well. So things flow better when you're connected to that energy source that is so much greater than you. And so that's what I do, is I have a daily practice. Not that I'm perfect at it, because I'm not, but I really do my best to, in the morning before I do anything else, wake up, check emails or anything. I don't go from my phone. I get up and I sit, whether that's in meditation or journaling and setting intentions for the day. And I've noticed for me that that's been very helpful in having a smoother day. When I don't do that is when I notice things are off. And even if it just means stepping outside to walk my dog, because now you're getting out of the house, you're in nature, and being in nature alone can be incredibly soothing for your nervous system and helps to shift your brain waves to that brain wave that allows you to be more creative, to be able to access the things that we want to access throughout the day.
What motivates you?
What motivates me? Oh, I feel like for me, kids are a huge motivator. Everywhere I go, I see them. And I've spent 20 years of my life working with them. And the idea that we could change the story around parenting, the idea that we could start believing that parenting doesn't have to be so darn hard, that's a story we're telling ourselves, that when we have a roadmap and we have a better understanding and a better foundation, that it can be more flowing. The belief that the extraordinary for all of us can become the ordinary, because we all are incredible humans with this incredible potential that we just don't know how to tap into. Those things really motivate me and excite me, especially when I see other people learn to tap into that and see their own worth. That gets me going all the time. I just really enjoy seeing other people succeed and do well and feel good. And when they're not feeling great, embracing it and shifting that, because it's really about embracing the human experience as a whole without judging it, without judging ourselves. And I know that's easier said than done, but there are so many ways to do that. And that really inspires me, to be able to see the shift in people and in our world and in myself, because I'm part of that too.
Have you seen the stigma of just talking about mental health lessening?
I have. Thankfully, I have. I am very grateful for that. I think we have a really long way to go, but it has been getting a little bit better. I think a lot of people are coming out and talking more about it, feeling a little bit more safe. Where I notice there's like a misconception is when we think about the early childhood and how we're shifting to doing parenting a little bit different, is there are a lot of misconceptions about positive parenting. And I've heard the word gentle parenting being thrown around, and I don't, we can't just let kids run the world. It's not quite that. So I've noticed there's a lot of stigma around shifting the way we view parenting, because it's just misunderstood, really, more than anything. Because it's not meant to be like, oh, let's just let our kids do whatever they want. No, it's more honoring and respecting them as humans and finding a way to do this together, as opposed to you coming in and laying down the law. Because the kids still need boundaries and all of that. It's incredibly important. And it doesn't mean that you don't have them. It means that you still honor how they feel, even if you don't agree with it. So, for example, oh, you're really mad that I didn't buy you that toy at the store. I get it. It's hard. Doesn't mean you're going to buy the toy or that you're going to just give it to them. So I've noticed stigma in that area, because that is a lot of where I spend my time. So, but I still do see things getting a little bit better. And because of it, I also notice that there is a shortage of providers available to help the community because there is more of a demand for mental health services that hasn't really been there before. And because of it, I do see a massive shortage, especially when I was working for the county. We had wait lists as long as 4 to 6 months, which is really
Wow.
sad to me.
Yeah.
So I have noticed that.
How can people reach out and learn more?
So my business is LumiTot, super simple, LumiTot. So I have my website. I also have just a simple guide to help you start to instill that lifestyle that really optimizes the brain. And it's gift.lumitot.com. And I'm on all socials as LumiTot as well. So I try to make it as easy as humanly possible because we don't need any more complications in the world, right? We need ease and flow.